Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting and agenda. We're going to be discussing transparency, reliability, and collaboration in the carbon market. We have some wonderful experts who are going to be joining us. But first, let me introduce the topic and introduce myself as well. My name is Michael Green. I'm the Climate and Energy Director for the American Sustainable Business Network. ASBN is a business group spread out across the United States, representing just over 250,000 businesses in all different types of industries, shapes, and sizes, but are working together on shared values around key policy initiatives related to climate and energy, regenerative agriculture, workplace rights, and many other progressive issues that we would love for you all to find time to get involved. So a little bit about today's conversation. We're going to be focusing in on the ICC carbon market principles, as well as discussing the importance of integrity and transparency and what it means going forward for the marketplace. Well, first, let's talk a little bit about carbon markets as a whole globally. Last year, they reached a $2 billion valuation in just the voluntary space. In the regulatory market was almost 10 times that. So we've seen massive growth over the last 10 years. Within that, we also saw a price jump of up to 60%. Now, this is all because of why, of course, the spurring and new pledges of corporate leaders as well as governments from around the world moving towards net zero. Now, this uptick has also created quite a lot of interest in political engagement in carbon markets, especially in political engagement through the voluntary carbon market space. Up to this point in time, a lot of the regulations or rules being set within the space have really been dependent upon coalitions or groups working together to create shared principles or create opportunities of agreed collaboration. Now, with that, with government engagement within that space, we've seen the importance of transparency, reporting, and verification. Just last week, there were several members of the United States Congress who sent a message to regulators asking for stronger regulation in this space. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about, is that needed? Why are governments making this push and making this as a part of their drive to create stronger validity within the market, and really come across the question of, is that needed in the first place? Whether there's government engagement or corporates leading the charge on around these issues, it's important that transparency and credibility claims being made are absolutely critical, are at the forefront and part of a well-functioning marketplace. So we have a few experts to talk about these issues today. First, we're going to be joined by Angela Rodell, who currently serves as the chair of the Delphos International Advisory Board, chair of the Pacific Pension and Investment Institute, and a volunteer board member of Launch Alaska, and a member of the investment community for the Alaskan Community Foundation. She previously served as CEO of the Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation, leading the organization and sovereign wealth fund to record growth during a pivotal time in the state's history. Ms. Rodell was the past chair and deputy chair for the International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds and past secretary board member for the Juneau International Airport Board. Angela, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
Next, I'm going to introduce Jorge Arbache. Jorge is the vice president in private sector is the Vice President of the Private Sector Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, or CAF, and Professor of Economics at the University of Brasilia. He is the Secretary of International Affairs at the Ministry of Planning and Chief Economist at that ministry. Previous positions include Executive Secretary of the Brazil-China Investment Fund, Senior Economic Advisor to the National Bank for Economic and Social Development, Senior Economist at the World Bank, Economist at the International Labor Organization, and member of the Board of Director of many large companies, banks, and member of several of their advisory boards. Jorge, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Next up, we're going to introduce Fran Benedito. Fran is the CEO and co-founder of the startup ClimateTrade, a visionary entrepreneur that founded his first company at the age of only 16. He holds a law degree in the MBA, which he completed in France, and one of the top 100 worldwide fintech influencers in the SDGs and the Sustainable Development Goals. Fran worked in the business industry for 15 years before co-founding ClimateTrade, as well as ClimateCoin, the world's first crypto asset, in 2017. ClimateCoin was presented at COP23 and is recognized as one of the best solutions to address climate change in 2018 by the UN World Economic and Social Survey. In 2019, Benedito founded ClimateTrade with the purpose of establishing an exponential company focused on sustainability. In 2021, he was recognized as one of the 100 Latinos most committed to climate action. And while he comes from finance, we are so lucky to have him over working in the climate space now. Thank you, Fran, for joining us.
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me.
So we're going to start out with just a kind of a more general question. Angela, talk to us a little bit about the ICC carbon pricing principles. We're 1 year after these have been presented. Are companies following the guidelines, and how much support have the CPPs received from the carbon market?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so a year ago, the ICC passed its 8 principles, which I think were really important for the chambers to have a universal platform of agreed upon principles with regard to the carbon markets. And as you might expect, companies find it easier to adopt certain principles than others. They may have been farther along already on some of the principles than they are on others. For example, on promoting consistency or reporting a cost basis for their carbon impact. Those are the types of things a lot of companies were already very much engaged in looking at the markets, whether voluntary or mandatory, to see where it's appropriate to price perhaps their own carbon emissions requirements. But there are some things that are going to be more challenging for them. For example, possibly reinvesting their carbon revenues to the extent they get collected by companies themselves, or to the extent they're collected by governments, and whether or not governments are actually reinvesting those revenues back into specific projects, or if they're just being placed into a general revenue bucket that's being used for all governmental purposes. So we're seeing the adoption and the use of these principles. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think the ICC should be really pleased with how it's already getting started. You've seen a lot of that momentum. And the government response, quite honestly, has increased as well. You mentioned in your opening remarks some of the steps being taken. We're also seeing steps like by the Securities Exchange Commission on adopting more formal reporting requirements because of the increased potential risk to shareholders. We're seeing a lot more shareholder engagement. So companies are responding not just to demands by organizations like the ICC, they're also responding to their own government needs, requirements to where they're based, and they're also responding to shareholder interest in this space. So I think we've seen a lot of momentum, especially for 1 year of progress. And now the challenge will be to continue to spread the message by the ICC and to spread it into all the individual chambers within countries, and then downstream to local chambers as well, and make sure that those messages continue to spread and get bought into.
And you touched on the uptake and interest from, of course, from the chambers and from the corporates, but what about the markets and the market players themselves? What kind of interest and how have these principles been received by them?
You know, it's interesting because for institutional investors in the US in particular, if you look at big institutional investors, you have a real mix of purposes for that investment. The longer term focused investors are really focused on this market, really believe that it's a risk mitigation investment. But they're also concerned about returns. We're in a really volatile global market today. Returns are down around the world. And I think part of the challenge we're seeing in this market right now is as it competes with other security types, both from a return and a risk perspective. And so there's a little bit of concern that this is not going to generate the returns that they might have needed, or were willing to take lower returns because they had such higher returning other assets that when blended, it didn't impact the bottom line. So we've got to get back to focusing a little bit on the long-term returns in this space. And I think you'll see a lot of interest by investors as we talk more about risk. And that's why the transparency that this panel is centered around is so important, because the free flow of capital, the setting of pricing mechanisms only can improve with increased transparency. And so to the extent that we can push those initiatives, I think we'll see a much more robust market and big players coming into that market because they can see how these securities trade.
Yeah, no, that's great, and that kind of brings me into one of my next questions I had here. And Fran, I'm going to bring you into the conversation here a little bit. I'm curious, Angela's got a great perspective on what she's seeing and how the principles are being applied. But your marketplace, your platform for people to actually be engaged in buying or selling and listing on the marketplace is a critical piece in that. How are you seeing the individual buyers, whether that be chambers or corporates, applying the ICC guidelines to navigate their purchasing patterns within your marketplace?
Well, thanks, Michael. Basically, like the ICC principles are one of them on the most important one is driving companies towards how to educate themselves on SMEs and companies on how to navigate these the voluntary markets. No? So basically it's about they drive you through education on how to calculate your carbon footprint and how to establish that carbon pricing, that minimum principles, that minimum quality price, products or projects that you are acquiring. No? So I think that in terms of the ICC as a global, then we have to go more local in terms of the chambers of commerce, as Angela was saying, and then establishing tools that the chambers of commerce can promote between their members, because at the end it has to be local, because there are millions and millions of companies that need to go that locally, and whenever they don't know something, they go to the chamber of commerce asking for help, right? So what we did is develop several tools like a white label. So we developed a white label with a calculator and a access to our marketplace, where we have the supply of the most of like all projects certified and verified around the world with the biggest standards. Obviously, following in most of them, like what we want to do is bringing projects aligned with the CCPs, right? And so basically the companies have a place to go, get educated, and calculate the carbon footprint from the same chamber of commerce locally. No, so it is something that we think that is important, and the use of blockchain for that, the transparency that blockchain provides, as the Article 6 also mentioned, no, like new technologies applied to climate, and how do we use the blockchain to provide that transparency that we need. I remember in the first COP, when I participated, I was in a panel with one of the biggest chemical companies in France. France was way ahead in terms of carbon pricing compared with other countries. They were already setting up a carbon price of $75. Today, we are talking that many companies some of the companies that are more advanced, they are putting a target of $100 per ton, right? So, yeah. So that's something that I think that is a matter of education. We need to go local, because the companies cannot go only, the ICC cannot, provide services to all that local companies, but we need tools, no? So we think that tool can be cool. That can be something that the companies will be understanding, will be using, calculating at the first thing, and then establishing if they want to offset, but first establish the targets and the reduction targets that they have in order to achieve net zero. No, yeah, but I mean, we need that, and from my perspective, we have to do it locally.
Thanks so much for that, friend. And so I think it's really important that we're talking about calculating the footprints, using the various newest technologies and tools that are available, widely available to our chambers and to corporate partners. Making sure then with that calculating that we're going out and purchasing and looking for projects that are high credibility, and also that we can have high levels of transparency as projects are moving between corporate partners or from project developers out to eventually being retired. And one of the things that I really love to see in this, drive for transparency, drive for higher credibility in the claims that corporations are starting to make, is that's unlocking higher ambition. Because if we understand our carbon footprint, if we understand where we're trying to go and the avenues and paths that we're taking, then you're right, Fran, we can drive for those higher prices, unlocking greater, more high-tech and solution-oriented projects for countries, and with that, a higher price for those projects as well. It's really a win-win on both sides. But Jorge, I want to also bring you in here, because one of the things that is really, really key is collaboration across various groups in order to make sure that we're working through either something like the ICC carbon pricing principles or some of the other various collaborations that have been propped up over the last few years to create a common framework for participating in the market. What's the role in collaboration and in initiatives like ILEC in fostering the generation of quality carbon credits?
Thank you, Michael, for this question. ILEC is a framework in Latin America and the Caribbean. What we are looking for, we understand that the region has a lot to do in this regard. As you all know, the potential for unlocking voluntary carbon credits in the region is absolutely huge. It has to do with the natural resources in the region, the biomes, the availability of water, and several other conditions. And what we are seeing in the region is that each single country is following its own direction in organizing the voluntary carbon market. And why that fragmentation? Why that fragmentation can be a problem? Because each of those markets can be very small. The costs for doing business there can be very costly. And beyond that, it has also to do with integrity and also with financing projects. So in the end, those markets may not attract as many investors and project developers as one may expect. What we are trying to do, we set up this framework in order to help organize the market, but at a regional basis, based on standardization, harmonization of the market, so that we'll have a kind of a regional market in terms of having a marketplace for players, for providers of services, including certification and others, to take part and to increase competition in that market. This is one thing, reducing the cost, so increasing the margin for the project developers. That may also attract more and better investors. A second thing has to do with integrity, as my colleagues in this panel have already mentioned. This is absolutely critical. everything that has to do with greenwashing and other aspects are critical for making or unlocking all the huge potential that the region has in terms of being a protagonist, a big player at the global level. And the third pillar of our initiative has to do with financing those projects. We are working with 13 national development banks in the region, in Brazil, in Panama, in Argentina, Chile, Mexico, and other countries. It's a kind of a coalition, so that we understand that this coalition will help organize the markets based on common principles, harmonization, and more and better integrity. And as I mentioned, we will help project developers to fund and to find financing for their projects. We understand that that may be an important tool for advancing in the voluntary carbon market in the region.
And also critical for attracting external investment into the markets, right? At the same time, having that external investment, especially in smaller markets, especially in newer markets, becomes very, very critical, because it kind of acts as that price floor, that investment floor, keeping the market afloat when maybe you have a higher flight risk for newer investors or in-country investors who are not as comfortable or not as prepared or seasoned of an investor in carbon markets. Is that correct?
It's correct. This is part of the story, but another part of the story, as I mentioned before, has to do with how to increase the margin of the project developers. If you are in a small market, I won't mention any countries in specific, but if the margin of the project developer is small, you may not get interested in participating in such a market.
Right.
And you may not attract good investors or smart investors for helping develop the voluntary carbon market. So increasing competition in the value chain may be critical. So in the end of the day, one of the aspects is how to increase the margin of the project developer, so that it becomes more attractive, and we expect that will help increase the quality and the amount of credits being put available in the market. We understand that considering the huge potential of the region, if we indeed make the voluntary carbon market there more competitive, that will probably will probably help to make Latin America and the Caribbean one of the hubs at the global level in terms of carbon market. That beyond the benefits for the climate, for the environment, that will probably have also an important impact in terms of social impacts as well, especially because we are mostly talking about solutions that are rooted in local communities, in rural areas, and other frameworks where the social impact will go hand in hand with the environment. So that's probably a key aspect of this initiative as well.
Yeah, no, we'll come back to talking about Latin America and becoming a hub for this, as you state, because there was a recent analysis that came out that looked at a majority of the largest buyers on the global market, and a lot of them had roots or bases in Latin America, Colombia being one of the drivers there because of their in-house tax policy or in-country tax policy. But maybe we can circle back to that, because there was something else that you said that really made me interested, and that was about, of course, the connectivity opportunity for the smaller markets, but also the idea of increasing the margin for the project developers and making this competitive as far as buyers being interested in those projects. And Fran, your marketplace acts as a technology solution for that a little bit, doesn't it?
I was exactly taking notes about this point. I really like the job that CAF is doing, and amazing job in Latin America, and totally right. Totally, I agree with Jorge. But seeing many projects every day, like we are also getting involved in the development of some projects, and also looking for doing that with funding, no? Because there are many projects that they have like a lot of projections in front of them. They have good track record. They need funding to enlarge their operations, right? Also, we need to include, and that's why transparency again, and why these principles that we came up with, the CCPs, the voluntary carbon markets coalition, it is important because we need to bring some red lines about quality of what we are bringing to the market, and we need to bring new players, not only in the development side, but also in the certification, especially in the standard side, right? Because it's not, at the end, you have always the same players. We need to bring new players that are doing things correctly. We need to put them with, let's say, a base of requirements that they need to accomplish, bring new standards, and then we will bring more projects, right? And at the same time, we need to bring more funding companies, organizations that can fund all these projects. Because, I mean, basically, when you go to develop a project, and that's why I created ClimateCoin back in 2017. I mean, I saw that there was a tremendous opportunity to tackle climate change. Like, I don't know if I imagine you know the Drawdown project, no? So the Drawdown project brings all that solutions that if we can scale them up and be exponential, but you need funding and you need guidance, because most of the people are scientists that don't know how to execute, right? Or they don't know how to create a company that can bring this to practice, right? So going to your point, we are bringing new technologies, carbon capturing, for example, with microalgae. We are collaborating with one company now that is bringing artificial trees that capture CO2 in the cities. We can connect directly to the marketplace and bring that carbon credit generated real time to the marketplace to be sold. That's a way to get the funding automatically, right? We don't need to be waiting because if you go to a project now with a normal standard, you have to pay the project, you have to pay the certification, you have to pay the standard fees, and then you can go to market. There are companies that do not have funding to do that. Obviously, then we bring the same players, always the people that have more money, right? Yeah. So we want people that create innovative ideas like these guys with this technology of carbon capturing, that they don't have funding. We need that funding, and they don't have a track record of having that, let's say, that much money to go to the bank and say, give me the money, because if not, my project doesn't work, I'm going to pay you back with the money I made before, no? So that's why we created ClimateCoin, no? I think technologies are key, real-time carbon credits that we can generate from different sources, new technologies that already are in the Paris Accord. And obviously we need organizations like CAF giving funding to those projects and governments. And at the same time, new players and new standards that can facilitate sometimes some work that others are not facilitating, right? And accepting more connections and more technologies. Why is so difficult to have the marketplace connected to the registries to have real-time accuracy of the cancellation of the credits? I've been working on this since 2016 in trying to connect my marketplace. We are connected today with the standard. With the registry, of Colombia, with the co-registry. We have already connected also the marketplace with one registry in Europe, SIX Group, the voluntary registry of SIX Group. And we are looking to connect to other registries. Now there are initiatives on meta registries also they were also mentioned in the ICBCM. We need all that. We need all that to bring that new technologies, to bring more projects and to make it more attractive for the companies also.
No, absolutely. Now, Angela, when Fran's talking about being able to provide, transparency and also actually do credit issuance or doing this in real time, what he's using, and I'm in this space enough that I know these signal words for blockchain technology. And now, of course, for a long time, we've looked at and talked about the importance of transparency in the marketplace and carbon markets. But what I've often found in the relationship for where carbon markets and climate pledges live within corporations, it's often, and I say this lovingly, but it's often in marketing, not in governance or in a place where transparency is the key thing. Right? The key thing in marketing is to drive consumer interest. So if we're going to be using blockchain, talk to me a little bit about, corporates or chambers' interests in that technology and how it can be deployed in this space.
That's it's such an interesting conversation on this front, Michael, because I'm listening to Fran talk, and the word that keeps coming to mind is trust. We talk about transparency. We can have transparency all day long, but we want to trust the source, right? So if you are transparent and say this microalgae project generates this type of carbon capture and it's worth this carbon credit, we want to be able to trust that information. So it's transparency, but a lot of it goes back to trusting and verifying the source. So now you asked me about blockchain, because blockchain technology is known for its transparency. It's known for speed of trade, but it's not a trusted technology among companies and finance in particular. It is still viewed very skeptically. And I think part of it is the confusion people have between cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Unfortunately, the two words have been used simultaneously for the last few years. And so lay people, which, let's be honest, our average company, our average, small, medium, large business, they don't spend enough time in this space to understand the nuances between cryptocurrencies like Ethereum or Bitcoin and the blockchain technology, creating the ledgers behind it and how they work together, how they're different, how you can use blockchain technology to really promote. So this, to me, highlights the need for education and have the groups like the ICC and the chambers really spend some time in this space on what is blockchain ledger, building these ledgers, how they promote good business practices that can be trusted, and the investment come in, because there's an assumption being made that if we go to blockchain, we'll get more ease of use. It'll create the transparency we need in the carbon credit market. But if we don't trust blockchain as well, we're going to continue to struggle with that. And so, a lot of companies are looking at blockchain. They're looking at how they can use it for their own internal business purposes. Banks, finance companies continue to look at it because they have customers who need and want to use these ledgers, and want to understand how not to lose market share in terms of financial transactions if they don't get into the space and learn about this space. But finance is very slow to change. And so we're suggesting a huge rapid change here. And so it's just going to take a lot of education. But I do think blockchain is a platform that should be fully utilized and can create and support these voluntary trading platforms like we have seen and expect to see going forward.
Now, Fran, I'm going to give you a second here to respond to that, because I think your company sees this from both sides, right? Through ClimateTrade as well, ClimateCoin. But I think something Angela said that was really interesting is building trust through integrating blockchain technologies in-house into what they're doing within their own business. And I think that's a great way that we can be building trust. And you see it in the overall service provider marketplace for carbon markets. It's almost as if every morning when I wake up and read Carbon Pulse or wherever you turn for your marketplace news, there's a new company out there offering some kind of blockchain-based or crypto-backed technology. Friend, not to tip your hat to them too much, but for some of those new businesses that are getting propped up in this space, you've got a long track record of experience being a trusted service provider of blockchain technology solutions into the corporate sector. What have you learned, and is there something maybe that you could share from the past 5 years in that space?
Yeah, 2 points. I really like the Angela's response to your question. It's totally aligned with her. I mean, if you have the reputed source of data, of information, you got it. I mean, at the end, what you are putting it is in blockchain because it's a public ledger where you are sure that that's not going to be mutated, no? It's immutable. So at the end is where you want to put it, no? So if you have IoT and new technologies that provide that transparent source of data, you put it there, you got it, right? So that's one thing. Second thing, and one point that I don't know if you see it from that perspective, but at the end, this is a new technology. So we didn't have the cloud, and once we had the cloud, now everyone uses the cloud. So this is new technology. I mean, if we talk to someone about blockchain, they say, what is this? You know, but whenever we all accept that we are going to use it, everyone won't care, right? At the end, we will use it because it's a new established technology that will be there, right? So, I mean, it will happen. We have to differentiate that we have public ledgers and then we have private and private permissioned ledgers, right? So IBM is doing a private permissioned ledger, no? So at the end, what this means is as like a mix, right? On the company is using a blockchain because it's decentralized. It's not a central server. It's decentralized. But each person can have a node in their homes, right? It's more like a control nodes in the companies, no? That's a solution. The banks feel more comfortable with that, right? And in terms of your question, in terms of the companies that are popping up with these new solutions with blockchain, at the end, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, basically what we are doing is to tell them, hey, for me, it's all about positive impact, okay? Is where my money is going. Is if my money is generating an impact or not. Because at the end, yeah, we've seen a lot of things in the carbon markets supporting and funding projects that at the end, they need to be funded. So I really love Brazil for the projects of, for example, waste to biogas. I knew the big problem that you had in Brazil with the waste. So there were like mafias taking care of the waste, and then there was the Bahia Guanabara was all poison, the water and fish dead there. Now there are a lot of projects of landfills that convert that methane into biogas, right? Which is great. I sold a lot of carbon credits from that type of projects, right? Today we have possibilities of connecting with that biogas plants also, or we have possibilities to connect it with solar roofs or with electromobility chargers, with a lot of things, no? And then we put that on blockchain. Well, I mean, at the end, what we have to do is to use it as a tool. It's not the panacea. It's something that will bring. It is a tool, another tool. But at the end, what I have to know is my consumer, my company needs to know if what they are buying is generating any positive action or any positive impact. And if you solve that, the companies, I mean, we are in the age of transparency. So at the end, the companies will say, yes, I want to work with you. I want to buy these projects because I know that you are generating a positive action for the planet and for this problem we all have, right? So that's all that initiatives that are coming basically are going around bringing this on chain, bringing this in the blockchain. Yeah, we'll generate more critical mass. But I mean, we started on this for at the end, bringing that new technology, we did it. We work with more than 450 corporations today, and we have more than 11,000 users in the marketplace, which is I don't know if it's too much, is a lot or not, but from Spain, in my perspective, was a lot, or is a lot. Now we are growing in 5 countries. So we hope to bring this technology to more companies to tell them, hey, this is your certificate. It's been canceled in the registry. There is no possibility of double counting. So bringing new initiatives to that. And very happy that are other players coming in different countries, because we need that. And once we solve that part and say, hey, there is no more bribery, there is no double counting, there is no more obscurancy in the markets, then we are set up. Let's do more projects, because this is a common goal. This is something that we are competitors at some point, but we go together for the same goal, and this is huge. No, we have the next three decades for solving this problem, and we have to do it before that. And we need all the players possible generating projects and involving many companies in the equation, no? Because it's a private-public solution. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that analogy on the cloud, Fran, that you started out with. I'll use that. I can remember distinctly, my early years in college. I won't say the year, but I had professors that would say the cloud whenever they referenced it in class, and now how antiquated we put things on the cloud because that's where they go. Nobody talks about it in this strange way anymore.
It's funny. I made a project of my MBA when I finished. When I was in my 23 years old, I'm 43 now, so 20 years ago. I think we were in the university. I was making the MBA project, and I thought on the cloud. I made a project on the cloud where the cloud was not present in Spain yet. So I thought on, I don't know if you know Blue Space, that they you have a lot of stuff that doesn't fit in your home, right? So you go and you ask for I don't know how you say in English, like you ask for more extra space somewhere, you rent extra space, right? So basically this was the same thought I had. Hey, I don't have enough space in my computer. I will need to find some place, servers that can hold that. And that's why I made a project and I got the best grade. And that's basically it, no? So at the end, that's something that's the analogies that you can with ideas, at some point.
Yeah, no. Now, Jorge, I want to go back to you and talking about a piece of, using blockchain technology that we haven't talked about. We've kind of danced around it a little bit about this idea of things being able to happen in real time or instantaneously. If you talk to any project developer or project investor right now, one of the things that they'll say is the administrative bottlenecks is a huge issue. It's slowing down projects. And there was a recent report that was on Sea Carbon that said that in 2027, because of this bottleneck, we're going to see a huge gap in demand versus what's actually available for projects on the marketplace. So Jorge, if you could talk to me a little bit about how CAF looks at this administrative bottleneck concern and technologies or other solutions that could be helpful, whether that be blockchain or maybe something else that'll streamline this approach.
No, thank you, Michael, for this question. I really believe that if you are thinking at attracting more and more people, or more and more project developers into this market, we will indeed need to use technology, as Francisco and Angela were talking about. That's especially critical when we are trying to attract smaller developers, small projects in the middle of the forest, market nature-based solutions, project developers, and all those things. And it may be especially important when we are thinking that a lot of those things will come from developing countries. Where things related to, as I mentioned before, to greenwashing, things related to integrity and things like that may perhaps bring to the table some type of risk that prevent the market to keep developing. So we believe that standardizing a lot harmonizing the rules of the games, attracting those project developers into an arena where they know the principles and the best practices. That may be critical for the development of such a market. The administrative part of the story has to do with simplifying rules, simplifying the ways these project developers will participate into this market. That's again what we understand. This is part of what we are doing. We are at the moment developing or sharing knowledge with a lot of people in government, in the market, with banks, and with others, so that first they will know more and better what the voluntary carbon market is, how it works, what are the principles, the best ways to keep advancing and developing such a market. This sounds obvious, but it's not that obvious. Many people don't really know what we are talking about. But what we have seen is that once people understand the potential of such a market, many people may get interested in being in the government, being in the private sector. And another thing that we are doing regarding trying to make this market more attractive, and we are working on the demand side as well. So we have commissioned some studies that identify what investors are expecting from those markets, including the Latin American credit markets, so that we will somehow help develop those markets in the region in a way that will optimize the energy and all the efforts needed to develop those markets in the best way. So again, simplifying things based on common and basic rules, standardized rules, a single or a basic taxonomy, a lot of information. Another thing that I may share with you, we are putting together in a single document a lot in terms of service providers in this market, so that project developers will have information about who is doing what, how, in what way, what is working, what is not working. So in the end of the day, I'm talking about information, making information available so that it will reduce somehow the cost for people to get interested and to participate in such a market. So all those things we believe will help reduce administrative costs and in the end attract more and better people into this market.
You called it a lot of different things there, knowledge sharing and streamlining, but really at the end of the day, to me, what it comes down to is capacity building is something that you're really focused on. And that's what, we're going to need to see in order to grow carbon markets into some of these new geographic markets, as well as into new project types and solutions. It's really an intention and focus right now on that capacity building. So my hat really goes off to you in that. But I wanted to go back, as I said earlier in our talk, we would be talking, or in my remarks at the opening, I mentioned that we would talk a little bit about the role of government engagement and how it is influenced across regulatory markets and the voluntary market space. And specifically, one place that I mentioned as well was what's happened in Colombia, where a majority of the or not a majority, but a large percentage of the largest voluntary market buyers are actually coming from Colombia, spurred by the regulatory policies there in place. Can you give us shine a little light on what's happening there and maybe help us better understand that interconnection?
Yeah, Michael, what we see in Colombia and perhaps in other geographies is that the mandatory market is helping to organize and to order the market, creating spillovers into the voluntary carbon market. So in the end, they may go hand in hand. Think there is so the voluntary carbon market benefits from the mandatory carbon market. So we see this as a non-intentional benefits that the voluntary carbon market gets from the mandatory carbon market. I expect to see something similar to that in some other geographies in the region, including Brazil and perhaps other countries, but we see that they go hand in hand.
So I have one more question, and I'm going to actually give all three panelists a crack at this, and then we're going to wrap. And I'm not sure if people saw this announcement, but a recent review by Accenture found that only 7% of the companies that they vetted going through the SBTI climate commitment goals, that it set a net zero goal by 2050, were actually on track to meet that commitment. So 90% were actually wildly off in their trajectory in order to meet that emissions reduction number. Going through COP here, looking into 2023, where we absolutely have to double down on our commitments, leveraging these technologies in the marketplaces like what we've talked about today. What's your advice to those corporations? What do we say to them in order to get them to bridge that gap, stay with high ambition, and help become part of the climate solution? Who wants to start with that one?
Well, I can
please.
go. I mean, as a former banker, I was working in the investment side. Basically, the companies are all worried about the quarterly results. No, I remember Warren Buffett saying, "I don't know why you guys care about the quarterly results." No, I don't normally invest in a company that care about quarterly results. ESG indicators and the impact indicators are going to be every time more important for investors, and we need governments to bring, like in Europe, reporting regulations, financial regulations in terms of the carbon markets, in terms of the carbon footprint, and in terms of the road to net zero, that goals that need to be established by the companies. Because if we don't establish a global framework on that, or at least governments don't follow the same like Europe has started, we have a problem that the companies don't take seriously what is going to happen to them, and this is like a stick to them at some point, no? Because you have a budget, and the companies are looking for results. The CEO is hired to have better results and to make a better company, right? So that shouldn't be like that. We have every time more principles coming, important for CEOs, and investors are going to be demanding that. But I mean, it doesn't matter if we reduce a little bit on that results and we put more on the other side, because this is something that without us here, we won't have results. We won't have any revenue. So we don't have too much time, and the companies, every time more citizens and investors will be demanding that from there. So I think that they have to double bet on putting higher prices on carbon, going to better impact, better projects, and that has more impact, that for real generate that positive impact, and at the end, investing more money on that, right?
Fran, what I'm hearing from you is double down on what is working rather than focus on what hasn't worked. Jorge, what would you say to these companies as they're looking at the gap between where we need to be and where we're currently at?
Michael, I think that it has also to do, I fully agree with Francisco. I would add that it has to do with ownership. So companies have to take part on this effort. and consumers have to value that effort. I think that it has also to do with shedding more light on what companies do or what they don't do, and it has to do with transparency, with reporting, with the way they make the climate change and the environment part of their mission. It sounds obvious, but it's not necessarily there yet. And finally, I think that it may also have to do with impact. So we all have a lot more to do in terms of associating all those things that we are doing in the ground regarding the voluntary carbon market and many other things with a real impact, being on environment, being on local communities, on income, the impacts those things may have on poverty reduction, which it may be from our point of view, very important as well. So working with suitable indicators, well developed indicators, very good reporting may put some energy into the wheels here.
So what I'm hearing from you is get it out of your COP or Earth Day announcements and marketing and into your company's mission. Make impacts, no matter what kind of impact you're trying to have there across your SDGs. Embed that within your mission. Angela, over to you. Take us home.
Sure. And I'm just, I agree completely with what's been said and strongly encourage it. And I just want to sort of also turn the conversation just slightly and wrap up. Is that let's not forget a lot of these projects are long-term capital-intensive projects that are going to make a meaningful impact. And so while it's not going to move, I just want to remind everybody, we're not going to have these like quarterly metrics that move in linear lockstep motion where we can see. It's going to be lumpy, it's going to be messy, and it's going to, some days, some quarters you might have big impact numbers that will then be sustainable, and you may have 5 or 6 quarters with no measurable change as a result. So all I say is, like, let's just remember that when we're doing this and we're working these projects, we have to have a long time horizon, and it takes an extraordinary amount of commitment on a long-term focus to bring these projects to bear, and it takes a lot of partnerships within companies, between companies and their governments, between governments. And that is not done on a quarterly reporting basis. And so to have a little bit of patience with all of this as well, not to lose momentum, but to just have a little patience as well.
Absolutely. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as they say.
Right.
Well, Fran, Jorge, Angela, I want to thank you all for joining. I want to also thank our host, the ICC, for this amazing forum in which we're able to speak and share some of these innovative thoughts and allow leaders to speak right out to a global audience, in this case, directly from our homes. So be sure to continue to follow and engage with our speakers here. They'll be continuing to be at the forefront of this issue, pushing for transparency, pushing for credibility in the space, in their own personal work, I believe, but also in the institutions in which they represent. With that, again, my name is Michael Green from American Sustainable Business Network, and I thank you all for tuning in today. We'll be in touch soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
About net zero, but what does it actually mean? Put simply, it's about achieving a balance between the carbon we put into the Earth's atmosphere and the carbon we remove from it. Right now, across the planet, there's an imbalance. We release more carbon into the atmosphere than we take out. And in order to properly tackle climate change, global emissions need to fall to net zero by 2050. But the energy system of the future doesn't just need to be more sustainable, it needs to be more affordable too. And, as the current energy crisis shows, we can address both these challenges by reducing our dependence on imported gas. So how do we get there? The truth is, we all have a part to play, and an industry that has a bigger job to do than most is energy. It starts by looking at how we generate electricity. The world needs to move away from old forms of power generation, like the burning of coal, and invest more in natural resources like wind and water. To do that, though, the infrastructure that transports more sustainable sources of electricity needs to be upgraded. This will require significant investment in the wires, poles, and towers that transport cleaner energy from where it is generated to where it's needed most, in our homes and workplaces. All this needs to be done in a way that is fair and just for the people and environments that are impacted. Workers need to be supported in a transition to more sustainable jobs. Communities need to be looked after. Nature needs to be protected. A just transition to net zero is key. And we need to explore and facilitate new technologies as well, like electric vehicles, energy storage, and the capturing and storing of carbon too, in order to find more ways to reduce our emissions and contribute to the fight against climate change. Reaching net zero by 2050 will take a global effort, but together we can get there. Here's how. More renewable sources of energy, more innovation, more investment in our electricity networks, and more focus on making this a just transition for all. We know it won't be easy, but if we succeed, the prize is a future system that is more sustainable and affordable for everyone. That's why we're committed to playing our part in building a better world of energy.
Combating climate change is the biggest engineering project on the planet, and there are solutions. Because there is action. Braskem is removing CO2 from the atmosphere in the production of chemicals and plastics from plants, using more and more renewable energy sources,
improving the energy efficiency
of our industrial units, and developing technology to transform the greenhouse gases emitted into new products. Because there is only one way to make a more sustainable future. Together,